The sword abyss was very large and occupied one side of Taishan Mountain. Aside from what Futian saw in front of him, there was also the sword cliffs and sword residence behind the sword peak. The sword abyss was very large and occupied one side of Taishan Mountain. Aside from what Futian saw in front of him, there was also the sword cliffs and sword residence behind the sword peak. Sword cliffs was also known as sword cliffs of trials. Countless cultivators honed their swordsmanship there, leaving sword marks on many cliff walls, many of which were left by ancestors of great swordsmanship. Sword residence, on the other hand, was the cave residence where many swordsmen cultivated. It was a blessed place like heaven on earth. After the cave residences were emptied by the ancestors, they became unoccupied, and there were most likely records of swordsmanship comprehension inside. In addition, there were also superb sword techniques inherited from Taishan Mountain itself. Lord Taishan was knowledgeable and had many sword scriptures in his collection, some of which were definitely the most supreme. Many years ago, Lord Taishan himself was also a magical talent. Futian watched the practice of swordsmanship in the sword abyss and watched disciples practicing. He was deep in thought. Although most of the disciples of the sword abyss could not beat him in swordsmanship, there must be someone among them with whom he could learn from. Not to mention that their swordsmanship had been passed down from Taishan Mountain. The sword that he had just observed wielded by Wan Shuyi was extremely stunning. If the cultivation reached its peak, it would be an incredibly strong sword technique, like the Guqin path. Although he was good at it, he knew that even though he appeared powerful, his true skill was varied and unrefined. In swordsmanship, though he had combined his own comprehension and the soul-breaking sword techniques that he had acquired previously, he was relying heavily on the advantages of the way. In truth, his swordsmanship was far from sufficient, especially in the top tier of sword techniques. He was not nearly as invincible as was rumored in the realm of ruin. What do you think? Futian was watching the swordplay when several disciples of the sword abyss approached him and asked him a question, smiling. The disciples of sword abyss are superb in swordsmanship, Futian said with a smile. You are an expert in music, and now that you are observing the swordplay, do you have any comprehension? The person asked again. All methods are connected, including the sword techniques. Before, I saw that Brother Wan's swordsmanship was superb. After that, I saw several other swordsmanship. Though wielded differently, they all had the shades of that one technique. I would greatly like to know if they were all from the same sword technique? Futian asked. That's right. The other nodded and said with a smile. This sword technique is one that all the disciples of Sword Abyss want to learn, but the disciples of Sword Abyss are many. Those in the Saint Plain, who can reach the level of Brother Wan, are few at best. Even swordsmen of Runhuang Realm at Taishan Mountain find it difficult to accomplish. What sword technique could be that enticing? Futian asked curiously. The fleeting divine sword. The young man smiled and said. But most people can only cultivate to the first level, a glimmer of sky. This first level is the most suitable for those who understand the way of space. Its power is the strongest, the most authentic. Read more chapter on novel full. So it is. But Brother Wan's sword was more than a glimmer. What level is he at? Futian asked. The other looked at him with a smile and said, the second level, cleave of all things. When cultivated to this level, with a single sword strike, the void will be cut into countless pieces, hence the name. How about the third? Futian asked. The third level of the fleeting divine sword naturally would be fleeting. However, only very few Runhuang on Taishan Mountain have cultivated to this level. Once the sword is deployed, time flows like water, and years go by, hence the name fleeing. With the fleeting divine sword, there is no countermeasure, and ultimately, this technique is also divided into different strengths. Only those who are experts at a variety of the strengths of the Great Path can reach the peak. On Taishan Mountain, only the Lord has reached the ultimate state of the fleeting divine sword. The other party smiled and explained, gazing at Futian with interest. They asked, Brother Shin is interested in cultivating in this technique? Seeing how unusually powerful this sword technique is, I am a little interested. But my talent is limited. If I choose to cultivate it, I don't know which level I could reach. Futian replied in a low voice, and did not deny his intentions. He did not come to Sword Abyss for frivolity, but to cultivate, so there was nothing to hide. It's easy for Brother Shenjing to get started. Although the fleeting divine sword is the ultimate sword technique, the first 2 levels are not a secret. There will be no problem if you are interested to cultivate. Moreover, the Sword Cliffs of Trials contains many marks of previous cultivations, so you can take a look, the other added. Futian nodded slightly. Thank you for telling me. It's but a small matter, the other replied with a smile. They continued. If there is any problem, Brother Shenjing can come to us. For sure, Futian answered, and the other left. Futian watched for a few more moments before leaving Sword Abyss. Afterward, besides practicing in the string pavilion every day, he also watched the swordsmen in the Sword Abyss. Everyone in Sword Abyss knew now that they had a musician who liked to learn. He was also the guardian of the string pavilion, the one Miss Four personally escorted to Taishan Mountain. Futian was very quiet at Sword Abyss, spending most of his time watching the swordsmen and observing. He rarely spoke to anyone. Occasionally, he would ask some questions, and his humble and studious attitude made many others like him quite a bit. After all, the disciples of Sword Abyss were mostly in the Saint Plane, and they all had extraordinary temperament. Under circumstances that did conflict with their own interests, they were more than willing to answer Futian's questions when prompted. Over time, Futian seemed to have become one of the disciples of Sword Abyss. Many of the cultivators of Sword Abyss were used to his existence. However, Little Phoenix was often displeased and secretly complained that Futian dabbled in everything. Instead of concentrating on the Guqin path, he had now gone to the Sword Abyss frequently to study sword techniques. With no one to chat with, the Little Phoenix was deprived of some enjoyment, as she greatly liked when Futian played the Flight of the Phoenix pair, with which she could resonate. Every time she heard this piece, she would feel herself progress. It was as if she too was moving toward the next level. On this day, a guest arrived at Sword Abyss, which was a quite lively occasion. The young mistress of City Lord's residence at Taishan City, Princess Luoyue, whose father, the City Lord of Taishan City, had inherited the swordsmanship of Lord Taishan. Previously, Luoyue had also practiced at Sword Abyss for some time. This was the place where she learned her craft, and today, the City Lord of Taishan took her to visit the Lord, so Luoyue took this opportunity to revisit Sword Abyss. Many disciples at Sword Abyss knew Luoyue, and they were accustomed to addressing each other as brothers and sisters. At this time, there was a sword cliff behind Sword Abyss and Sword Peak. Many disciples were there. This was a famous sword cliff at Sword Abyss. Upon the cliff wall, there were marks of swordsmanship left by a very powerful elder. Many would come here to observe the sword will that was contained within. Luoyue stood in front of the cliff wall and looked at the sword cliffs. Although her father was a mighty figure in swordsmanship, and derived other methods of battle from his swordsmanship, the attacks even included those of battle axe. Sometimes, however, it still required the expediency of other sects to absorb even more knowledge. Her cultivation of the fleeting of the divine had encountered a bottleneck at the second level, cleave of all things. It was difficult for her to advance any further. Therefore, she wanted to come to Taishan Mountain again, and so her father brought her. Looking at the cliff, Luoyue's body could not help but exude a powerful sword will. The sword of eradication was wrapping around this space. For a long time, her shape flashed and pointed toward the void. Suddenly, a great amount of sword chi swept through the void. A devastating storm of sword chi now appeared, cutting through the sky above. Sister Luoyue's sword is even more refined. It won't take long for the cleave of all things to become a reality. At this time a voice spoke. It was Wan Shui, a disciple of Sword Abyss, addressing Luoyue. Senior brother praises me too much. I know my level, and it is still a ways away compared to senior brother, Luoyue whispered. She could not help but recall the swordsman she encountered in the realm of ruins. His sword was very simple, and a single sword strike sufficed. She wondered how it would compare with brother Wan Shui. There's not much difference. It is already on the verge, and a breakthrough can happen at any moment, Wan Shui said. Luoyue, let me try the sword for you. Luoyue looked at Wan Shuyi, then nodded and said, "Thank you, brother." As they finished speaking, the two walked to one side and were suspended in midair. Many figures flashed over this way in preparation to watch the exchange between the two. Clearly, Wan Shuyi intended to use his swordsmanship to guide Luoyue. In an instant, sword chi was everywhere, and as everyone expected, as outstanding as Wan Shuyi's sword, he had left some room because his goal was to guide Luoyue step by step. Luoyue's sword was very similar to his, but there always seemed to be something missing. At this moment, suddenly the sound of guqin was heard. It merged into the sword. It was as if the sound of the guqin perfectly matched the exchange of swordsmanship. Some continued to watch the swordplay, while some glanced in the direction of the music. It was Shen Jing, who had been playing often recently, and no one was surprised by it. Wan Shuyi and Luoyue's swords were getting stronger. Wan Shuyi began to apply pressure in an attempt to force Luoyue to unleash her sword, but Luoyue still felt that she somehow fell short. At this moment, the sound of the guqin flowed into her ears, and an illusion appeared in her mind. The sound of music was like that of the sword. She could not help but wave her hand. In an instant, the sword light was shining, and a flash of radiant sword light also crossed Luoyue's beautiful eyes. As her heart surged in an instant, the sword will form her body was getting even stronger. Buzz! One sword manifested. It brightened the 9 heavens and collided with Wan Shuyi's sword. At this moment, the two storms intertwined. The sword was annihilated, and the battle stopped. After a while, everyone saw that the sword chi had gradually dissipated, and in the void, the two stood opposite each other. "Congratulations, junior sister," Wan Shuyi said with a smile. "Success." All the disciples were a little shocked. Senior brother Wan tried the sword for Luoyue, and successfully led her to comprehend and reach an epiphany, leading to a breakthrough in swordsmanship. Now her strength was even more superb. At this moment, Luoyue was still in a daze. The feeling of the sword just now. "Thank you, senior brother, for trying the sword with me." Luoyue bowed slightly to Wan Shuyi. "You were only a step away. You would break through sooner or later. It had little to do with me." Wan Shuyi smiled. A single step could be a trap for a long time. Luoyue shook her head. This was something she understood. At this time, she turned her eyes and looked at the figure on a boulder in front of the cliff. Yi Futian sat there with a guqin in front of him, but at this time the music had already stopped. She remembered the musician at Taishan Tavern, Shen Jing, and had heard that he was now guarding gyukins in the string pavilion. He was very eager to learn, and had come to the sword abyss to cultivate. Was that moment just now a coincidence? Luoyue murmured in her heart. That flash of spiritual light seemed to be guided by the sound of guqin. Shen Jing greets Princess Luoyue. Seeing Luoyue looking at him, Yi Futian smiled and nodded at Luoyue. Luoyue looked at Yi Futian, and seeing that the other did not appear out of sorts, thought that she was thinking too much. "Uncle sent you to Taishan Mountain just as a musician, but there are still many opportunities. Concentrate on cultivating," Luoyue said to Yi Futian and then left. "If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible." Yi Futian remained there, his eyes on the cliff, and continued to meditate his sword techniques. Yi Futian remained there, his eyes on the cliff, and continued to meditate his sword techniques. Luoyue was the daughter of the city lord of Taishan City, but she was not overbearing. Whether in the Battle of the Realm of Ruins, or the meeting at Taishan Tavern, he had felt positive about her. Not to mention, she was also related to the house master of Taishan, as a disciple of Taishan Mountain. His admission into Taishan Mountain to cultivate was a favor. When he saw that Luoyue needed help, he was able to help her with the music, without being too obvious about it. After all, even without him, Luoyue would make a breakthrough on her own sooner or later. To him, it was just an easy task that cost him nothing, so there was no reason to be stingy. It was just as how the house master of Taishan had helped him to get to Taishan Mountain. "Shen Jing, when I listened to your guqin, it matches perfectly with the battle of swordsmanship. It seemed as if I had heard nothing at all. It didn't appear to be intrusive." A person next to him said, I guess to get to this point, your expertise in Guqin's superb, and you must also have a deep understanding of swordsmanship? Yi Futian looked at the speaker and smiled. These days, many recognized him in Sword Abyss, so they would often talk to him. In front of the disciples of Sword Abyss, how dare I speak about the understanding of swordsmanship and show off? Yi Futian said with a smile, full of humility as usual. The other was accustomed to it as well and smiled. Could it be that you deliberately hide yourself in your skills? I have never seen you practice the swords in Sword Abyss. The speaker's tone was very casual. They were obviously joking. I came to Sword Abyss to observe the swordplay. As for practicing, I better practice in secret when I go back, so you guys won't laugh at me. Yi Futian responded with a smile. Many around him smiled. Yet another said, but I think that you Xinjing are hiding your skills. Maybe, you have already made some achievements in swordsmanship. Yi Futian shook his head without saying anything more. His gaze continued to be fixed on the cliff wall. He was meditating. There was nothing more important than cultivation. With this opportunity for cultivation at Taishan Mountain, naturally, he would not waste it. He would use this opportunity to elevate his cultivation. On the other side, Wan Shuyi and Luoyue left together. Luoyue was still thinking about the breakthrough that had just happened. Although she thought it was a coincidence, that sound of Guqin so perfectly helped her. Perhaps even Xinjing himself was not aware of it. Xinjing's music was transparent. Its mood was extraordinary, and it was indeed a talent as far as the Guqin path was concerned. Perhaps this was the reason why Uncle sent him to Taishan Mountain in the first place, but it was not clear why he came to cultivate his swordsmanship. Brother Wan, what do you think of Xinjing? Luoyue asked. Not bad. Humble and studious, his future is promising. But it's unknown just how talented he is. But since Miss Four endorsed his entrance into Taishan Mountain, there must be something outstanding about him. Wan Shuyi responded, which was also his honest opinion. Well, there is a charm to his music. It's very pure. Luoyue nodded slightly. Brother Wan, if you have the opportunity, keep an eye on Xinjing. We have met once, so we knew each other. And because he was also sent by Uncle, don't let him be isolated because he's not a disciple of Taishan Mountain. Relax, Xinjing is well liked, and many disciples of Sword Abyss also take good care of him. Wan Shuyi smiled. Even without your instructions, because of Miss Four, we will do what we can. Very well. Luoyue nodded gently. Thank you, brother. Her instruction was considered returning the favor of the other, who had no idea how he had accidentally helped her to break through the realm of swordsmanship. Best wishes for him to achieve something great here. Luoyue couldn't help but think of the mysterious swordsman in the realm of ruins. If he came to Taishan Mountain to cultivate, he would certainly have infinite potential. Unfortunately, after that day, the mysterious swordsman disappeared. How would she know that the swordsman she was thinking of was cultivating swordsmanship at Sword Abyss? It was the same person she had asked to be taken care of. Without noticing, some time had passed. Yi Futian cultivated daily. On this day, in the land behind the string pavilion, he stood on the edge of the cliff in front of the sea of clouds. He held a sword in his right hand. His palms were stretched out as if time and space were still, but there was an invisible might in the surrounding heaven and earth. It was extremely suppressed. This sense of might seemed to permeate into every corner between heaven and earth, and it was everywhere. The palms passed over, and in an instant, a dazzling golden divine light flashed and disappeared. A golden trace appeared in the sea of clouds in front of him, which seemed to be bisected, but Yi Futian's movements did not stop there. His feet moved forward, and his arms passed over again, and another golden line bisected the space. It seemed to be cut through. This was the first level of the fleeting divine, sword of the ancient sword, a glimmer of sky. With each strike, a line in the void would cut through the sky. As he moved forward, Yi Futian unleashed sword strike after sword strike, and the sea of clouds turned from a state of calmness to highly turbulent, with the storm of swordsmanship tossing and turning. Countless sword marks crisscrossed. It was as if unconsciously, the swordsmanship had transformed from the first level, a glimmer of sky, to the second level, cleave of all things. After a moment, Yi Futian stopped and stood quietly above the sea of clouds. You practiced this long, and this is it. At this time, a clear voice was heard, and Yi Futian knew that it was the little phoenix. He looked up to Feng Yin, feeling the breath that came from the other. There was a smile in his eyes. You broke through? Yes, now I'm the same as you, Feng Yin said with swagger. Not bad. You broke through without even realizing it, Yi Futian said under his breath, a little envious in his heart. This kind of talent for cultivation was something that even many geniuses could not possess. The natural-born saint was indeed powerful. That's because I am the divine phoenix. Feng Yin held her head up high and looked at Yi Futian with some contempt. Unlike you, instead of practicing Guqin path, you ran over to Sword Abyss to practice swordsmanship, and after such a long time, your fleeting divine sword is still at this level. Did you just pass the first level? Yi Futian looked confounded. Was he being made fun of? He looked at the little phoenix with a smile. It seemed that after the breakthrough, Feng Yin was a little puffed up. At this moment, Feng Yin was staring at him without blinking. Judging from her posture, she was clearly a little excited and wanted to give it a try. Do you also know of the fleeting divine sword? Yi Futian asked with a smile. There are many at Sword Abyss who know of this sword technique in Taiyuan Mountain, so how could I not? Feng Yin said proudly. Yi Futian nodded. The disciples of Sword Abyss had also claimed that there were many who had cultivated the fleeting divine swords. But few were able to accomplish it because its power was great. So all those who cultivated in swordsmanship wanted to learn it. But very few were ever able to reach the peak of its power. Good. Since you know this technique, how about we give it a try? Yi Futian said with a smile. Great. Just as Yi Futian had guessed, Feng Yin came because she was eager to try it. Now seeing as how Yi Futian offered, she immediately agreed. This time, she would make this guy so embarrassed. It would be a change from his usual air of haughtiness. Let's get started. Feng Yin seemed a bit impatient, and the moment her words faded, Yi Futian instantly felt the temperature between heaven and earth rise sharply. In just a moment it was like a furnace. An imaginary divine flame enveloped the world, and Yi Futian seemed to be wrapped within it. There was a long whistle. The whistle of the phoenix reached the 9 heavens. A giant illusion of the divine phoenix appeared above the sky. The sea of clouds was branded red under the flames, and Yi Futian's body also seemed to be burning. However, he was still standing there quietly, extremely calm. With some movement from his mind, sword will traverse the vast space. It was seemingly everywhere. The sharp whistling of the sword came out a little piercing. The entire void was filled with an extremely sharp breath. I'm going to make a move. Yi Futian looked at Feng Yin. I'm going to make a move too. Feng Yin's pupils were burning with divine flames that shot toward Yi Futian's eyes. Yi Futian felt his will was also burning. He smiled as he stepped forward, disappearing in an instant, and the sword in his hand also sailed across with his body. Boom! The divine flame on Feng Yin also exploded at this moment, burning the world. But Yi Futian's figure disappeared in front of her. She found out, much to her shock, that in an instant Yi Futian's illusions were all around her. It was as if he was everywhere, and everywhere he passed his sword did too. An extreme sense of danger came over her, and Feng Yan's face changed suddenly. She felt that the space she was in seemed to be shattering. She was in a prison forged by cleave of all things. Countless crisscross sword marks were about to smash this space. Dad, Mom! Feng Yin closed her eyes and shouted. Buzz! A figure disappeared in a flash, and Yi Futian pulled Feng Yan's body out of there, as if intentionally leaving a gap. Below, the space was cut into countless fragments as if completely pulverized. Feng Yin opened her eyes and looked down rather fearful. Then she raised her eyes and stared at Yi Futian angrily. You were playing for real. Yi Futian looked at her innocently. You actually had the heart to strike. Feng Yin was extremely upset. Yi Futian had no response. 2 extremely dominant authorities of heaven descended, and a pair of phoenix demon emperors appeared in front of Yi Futian. Yi Futian's mouth twitched. Was she calling her parents again? How could they play? Shenjing greets has the elders. Yi Futian's heart was galloping, but on the surface, he was still politely showing his respect. 2 demon emperors stared at him, Their pressure of might bloomed. One could only imagine how much pressure Yi Futian felt at this moment, and how wronged he felt. "Dad, Mom, he bullied me," Feng Yin said aggrievedly in a weepy voice. Yi Futian was almost weeping himself. "How shameless. You want to show off and now you are in trouble?" the mother phoenix said to Feng Yin. It was not a bad thing for this girl to taste some hardships. She did not know her limit. Elder is wise. Yi Futian was grateful. As heaven was his witness, when did he bully Feng Yin? "You are not some good bird yourself. She is but a child. Why did you unleash such strong technique?" The mother phoenix stared at Yi Futian and asked. "Air." Yi Futian looked stunned, and he really wanted to rebuke with something like, "You are the bird, and in fact, your whole family is." But he dared not. Feng Yin a child? As a mother, she was on the side of her child no matter what. "You learned your sword technique from Sword Abyss?" Feng Yan's father asked. "Yes." Yi Futian nodded, and the other fell silent. The two demon emperors looked at each other, and their hearts were a little shocked. This guy had learned all 6 famous songs, and in such a short time, he had achieved the 2nd level of the fleeting divine sword. Was he here to guard the string pavilion, or was he here to steal the art? If this continued, would all the secret inheritances of Taishan Mountain be stolen? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. As the end of the year drew close, the number of cultivators visiting Taishan Mountain was increasing, and many of those who had gone to cultivate in the outer realms had all begun to return. As the end of the year drew close, the number of cultivators visiting Taishan Mountain was increasing, and many of those who had gone to cultivate in the outer realms had all begun to return. On this day, Taishan Mountain was lively. Lord Taishuan's 3rd disciple, String Emperor, had come from the String Palace to visit his master Lord Taishan, which caused many on Taishan Mountain to chatter. Moreover, many thought of Shen Jing, the guardian of String Pavilion. Now that the String Emperor had returned, no one knew what he would think of Shen Jing. If Shen Jing's luck held up, maybe he could become a disciple of String Emperor. Soon after the String Emperor Qin went up to Taishan Mountain, Miss 4 of Taishan Tavern and Taishan City had also come back, which caused more chatter among the disciples of Taishan Mountain. Miss 4 and the String Emperor still enjoyed a great relationship. Every time the String Emperor appeared, Miss 4 would not be far behind. In the palace of Lord Taishan, there were bursts of hearty laughter. Those who heard it all sighed, and thought Lord Taishan was probably only this merry when his disciples came to visit. There were many rumors that Lord Taishuan's favorite was Miss 4. Miss 4, who was the youngest, and was the only woman among the 4 disciples, therefore, she was naturally favored. Lord Taishan treated her like his daughter. The String Emperor was also younger, and liked by Lord Taishan. Yi Futian cultivated in the String Pavilion this day, and did not go to the Sword Abyss. He was the only one in the String Pavilion, so he was not very aware of the goings-on outside. At this time, he was still cultivating Guqin in the rear mountain. The quiet space, the misty sea of clouds, the sound of Guqin was melodious, beautiful, and had a strong penetrating power. Between the seas of clouds, there was a dazzling divine brilliance. It was gorgeous and radiant. A beautiful divine bird phoenix could be seen shuttling back and forth between the clouds in cultivation, as if inspired to dance by the sound of Guqin. Flight of the Phoenix Pair was the piece Yi Futian played most often, because it was helpful to Feng Yin. Although he didn't say anything, and even often argued with her, Yi Futian still played this song once in a while to resonate with the little phoenix. Although the girl's habit of often calling her parents for backup had greatly annoyed him, he was not in the habit of arguing with children. The rhythm of Flight of the Phoenix Pair was extremely beautiful. As the song ended, its mood still lingered. Yi Futian's 10 fingers moved away from the strings as if he felt something. Suddenly he looked up. A middle-aged man clad in white fur stood there quietly, without a trace of his breath. His whole person seemed to have blended into the space between heaven and earth. Yi Futian secretly shuddered. Someone had come near him, and he did not even feel it. Yes, he was concentrating on playing the Guqin, but his realm was of a certain level. If the other had wanted to attack him, he would not have even known it. So one could only imagine the prowess of this person. Of course, anyone who could achieve this level had no need to resort to an ambush, as he could kill him at will. Yi Futian got up calmly. He faced the middle-aged man in the white fur and bowed slightly. Shenjing, the guardian musician of the string pavilion, greets the elder. The person who came here undetected was naturally a cultivator of Taishan Mountain, and a powerful Renhuang at that. His status in Taishan Mountain must be high above all others. Yi Futian had some idea who this person might be. Shenjing, the man repeated in a low tone, and Yi Futian nodded. He raised his eyes and looked at the other, and saw that the man appeared to be in his 30s or 40s. He looked elegant and gentle with an excellent spirit, and was very attractive. Such a temperament must be irresistible to women. In the distance, the sea of clouds rolled over, and a gorgeous divine light shone between heaven and earth. The two figures appeared directly in the sea of clouds not far from Yi Futian. It was the pair of divine birds, the phoenixes. Their eyes were fixed on the man. They said, "You have returned." Upon hearing their words, Yi Futian knew that his guess was correct. Their master had returned. The master of String Pavilion, the third disciple of Lord Taishan, the String Emperor. The String Emperor nodded slightly only to see the little phoenix fly over in a hurry. Her beautiful eyes looked curiously at the String Emperor in front of her. "Feng Yan, where are your manners?" Next to her, her father prompted her, and the little phoenix came to and bowed. Feng Yan greets the String Emperor. "She is all grown up." The String Emperor revealed a gentle smile. He looked at Feng Yan. His eyes were extremely gentle and kind. He had witnessed Feng Yan's birth and blessed her, so that Feng Yan was born with a unique gift, a natural-born saint. Later on, he visited more infrequently, and had not seen Feng Yan much. Now, in the blink of an eye, she was already growing up to be a fine young lady of the unblemished plain. At this time there were footsteps. The two phoenixes shifted their gazes there. They bowed again, saying, "Miss Four." Yi Futian also looked over there. Not far behind the String Emperor, someone walked quietly this way. It was the house master of Taishan, who had sent him to Taishan Mountain to cultivate in the first place. She exuded noble temperament, and her statuesque figure was somewhat seductive. "Elder," Yi Futian bowed and said. The String Emperor turned to look at the house master of Taishan, whispering, "Junior sister." But the house master of Taishan didn't look at him. She walked right past by him, and her gaze landed on Yi Futian. "How is cultivation on Taishan Mountain? Have you gotten used to it?" "It's been very good so far, and the disciples of Taishan Mountain have been taking great care of me." Yi Futian nodded and added, "All thanks to you, elder." "Well," the house master of Taishan nodded, "all this talk of elder is making me feel quite old. Call me sister." Yi Futian looked stunned. This was not right, it was very wrong. Although he had met the house master of Taishan once, and also accepted a favor from her, when did their relationship become so intimate? Sister? Not exactly. This must be some kind of scheme. Many thoughts flashed past his mind in just a moment's time. Just then, the String Emperor had called out to the house master of Taishan, and she did not respond. Technically, the String Emperor was her senior brother, and her response was very unusual. The two possibilities could be that 1, they had a poor relationship, or 2, they had such a good relationship that common protocol did not apply. If it was very poor, then the house master of Taishan would not have come at all. And then, recalling Uncle Lan's initial attitude of sending himself here directly, Yi Futian suddenly seemed to understand something, and there was a sense of enlightenment. Yi Futian suddenly thought of the piece he had just played, The Flight of the Phoenix Pair. It was about the phoenixes traveling in pairs, and it had exceptional significance. When he considered this, Yi Futian felt tense all over. This was tough. Did he dare to call her sister? Yi Futian said nothing, panicking inside. "What? Do you think I'm old?" The house master of Taishan smiled softly and looking charming. She beautiful beyond description. Old? In the world of cultivation, such a concept did not exist, especially for those whose status was of an empress, as they were eternally youthful. The charm of the empress was so attractive that no one could even imagine them to be that old. But the String Emperor was looking on right beside him. Without a clear picture of the relationship between the two, would he dare? If he got killed, he wouldn't even know how he died. Don't joke with the likes of me. I dare not. Futian replied honestly because he really dared not to do so. The house master of Taishan still looked at him with a smile. But now, there was a bit of contempt in those beautiful eyes. Futian was fine with that. He was perfectly willing to give up when necessary. His life was more important. This is Shen Jing, a musician in my tavern. Not only is he handsome, but his musical skill was of a high level, so I sent him here to Taishan Mountain. My original intention was to have him cultivate in Guqin Valley, but I didn't expect Uncle Lan to place him here. Just then, those beautiful eyes of the house master of Taishan turned to the String Emperor at her side. She said, "Since senior brother has returned, I will take him away." Shen Jing apologized. Futian was a little speechless. He did not believe that the house master of Taishan was unaware that Uncle Lan had placed him here. That day when she sent him, she went up the mountain to visit Lord Taishan, while Uncle Lan sent him to the String Pavilion. At that time, she had not left yet. This was too hypocritical. Futian looked at the String Emperor, bowed slightly to pay his respects, and just as he was about to speak, the String Emperor spoke first. "Not necessary." Futian's body stiffened. He was caught in a dilemma. Since Uncle Lan put you here to cultivate, let's say it was fate. I don't come often, so it is good to have a musician to guard the pavilion for me. In the future, you should continue to cultivate here, the String Emperor said to Futian. A lot of ideas came into Futian's mind. If he continued to stay in the String Pavilion, would the String Emperor use that opportunity to secretly get his revenge? If it was because of that unspoken sister that he was now angry, it was truly unfortunate. Thank you, Elder. Futian dared not reveal what he was actually thinking. He bowed to show his appreciation. But he is my person, the house master of Taishan said, looking at the String Emperor. Futian wanted to die. He didn't deserve to be set up like that. Since when was he the person of the house master of Taishan? Then loan me your person to help me take care of the String Pavilion, and I will owe you a personal favor, the String Emperor said. Since senior brother has put it that way, then I'd be happy to oblige. The house master of Taishan smiled and said, Shen Jing, from now on, you should guard the String Pavilion well. I understand. Futian nodded. 3 days later, Master will speak at Taishan Palace, and all disciples of Taishan Mountain can go and listen. You should go with them to listen to Lord Taishan speak. Futian was slightly surprised, but he nodded and replied, certainly. This was also a rare opportunity. Lord Taishan was a man of colossal intellect who knew all things from past to present. He was known as a legendary person in the higher heavens realm. After the house master of Taishan glanced at the String Emperor, she turned to leave without saying another word. This made Futian quite confused about the two's relationship. But he always remembered Uncle Lan's words. Speak less, observe more. So very wisely he kept his mouth shut. The String Emperor moved his step and walked to Futian's side. His eyes fell on the Phoenix Guqin. Futian wisely gave way, so that the String Emperor could sit down in front of the Guqin. He stroked the strings with both hands. He whispered, I've not played it for a long time. As he was speaking, he plucked the strings with his fingers, and in a flash, the sound of the ethereal music was heard. It had a very strong penetrating power. The two Phoenix Demon Emperor's sword and gorgeous divine light was extremely bright, covering the String Pavilion. The sound of the Guqin gradually bloomed, piercing the sea of clouds. It penetrated Taishan Mountain. The sound of Phoenix chanting was crystal clear and resounded through the space. The two demon emperors danced above the sky, flying together. It was unbelievably spectacular. Futian looked up into the sky, and all he saw was beauty. But what he felt in his heart was a faint sense of heartache. This was the beauty of the Guqin, the faint sorrow hidden within the beauty. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. The music stopped within String Palace. The two empresses stood behind String Emperor, their hearts full of many different emotions. They had not been like this in a very long time. The music stopped within String Palace. The two empresses stood behind String Emperor, their hearts full of many different emotions. They had not been like this in a very long time. They had originally wanted to follow String Emperor when he left and went out into the world, but he had asked them to stay at Taishan Mountain. String Emperor looked up, his fingers still resting lightly upon the strings of his guqin. He looked over at Yi Futian and asked, "Which of the 6 songs is your favorite?" "Flight of the Phoenix Pair," answered Yi Futian. "Why?" asked String Emperor. "I think that music makes the emotions linger. It reflects the player's sorrow and joy, their pain and their pleasure. Only if they have deep feelings can they play with soul. Flight of the Phoenix Pair contains the deepest emotions of any of the songs," answered Yi Futian. "Thus, I think that Flight of the Phoenix Pair is the best one of these 6 songs." String Emperor's gaze rested upon him, then slowly shifted. He looked at the guqin that he had been playing and whispered, "It does not make any sense to waste String Palace by keeping it for my return. From now on, if you see anything you like, you may take it, including these guqins. There is no need to ask anyone for permission." Yi Futian was stunned when he heard this. String Emperor was giving String Palace to him. At first, he had entered Taishan Tavern while hiding his identity to come up to Taishan Mountain. He wanted to spend some time there cultivating, but everything that had happened afterward had gone surprisingly smoothly. The housemaster of Taishan had brought him up the mountain, and Uncle Lon had brought him to String Palace. And now, String Emperor was giving everything within String Palace to him. He was not sure what all of this meant. He was not even particularly excited by this prospect. He looked back at String Emperor. Would he really give away String Palace with a single sentence? Perhaps the housemaster of Taishan must have had something to do with this. But really, he was probably overthinking this. String Emperor was a powerful figure. Why would he care about the petty machinations of the housemaster of Taishan? There was nothing that he could do to hurt him. "Thank you, Senior." Yi Futian bowed in thanks. Although he was not excited by this, he still would not refuse it. The two empresses stared deeply at him. This guy had not been on Taishan Mountain for very long, and had already stolen so much. Now he had obtained String Palace. If the disciples of Taishan Mountain knew what he had gained today, they would not be so friendly towards him. The 10,030th year of the Divine Prefecture calendar drew to a close. On that day, Taishan Mountain, which was usually so peaceful, became quite lively. In addition to all the disciples who had returned from being abroad, the 4 great disciples of Lord Taishan were there as well, and they had brought many of their own disciples. On this day, Lord Taishan would teach the way. Everyone gathered together in front of Taishan Palace early in the morning. Although Taishan Mountain did not accept as many disciples as a lot of other places, there were still countless cultivators there. Cultivators from Guqin Valley, Sword Abyss, and other places were all gathered together. For a time, the area outside the palace was incredibly lively. Yi Futian also came quietly. He had come with Little Phoenix. Although he had met many powerful figures, and had even been personally taught by the Divine Elephant Emperor, this was the first time he had attended a lecture in this style. This would probably be very helpful for his cultivation. In addition to the countless saint-level disciples, there were also some Runhuang-level figures there, sitting in the foremost seats. Yi Futian saw many familiar faces. The place that he knew the most disciples from was Sword Abyss. Some of them smiled and nodded when they saw him. "Shenjing," came a voice. Yi Futian turned, and saw a group of people walking up. At the front were Wan Shuyi and Princess Luoyue, as well as Deng Hu and the others who had fought at the ruins. The people from the city lord's office had all come. Yi Futian smiled and nodded at them. "How has this period of cultivation been for you?" asked Wan Shuyi with a smile. "Not bad," answered Yi Futian. "But I am a little bit confounded whenever I practice swordsmanship. If we have a chance, I must ask you to teach me." Wan Shuyi nodded. "That makes sense. It is the Guqin arts that you are skilled in. If you run into any difficulties, I can give you a few pointers." His words were modest yet confident. "Thank you," said Yi Futian with a nod. "Brother Shenjing," came another voice. He saw Ma Yi and his sworn sister of Taishan Tavern walking over. Ma Yi was interested in Princess Luoyue, and when he saw her and Wan Shuyi together, his face changed a bit. "Sister Luoyue," he called. "Brother," replied Luoyue. "I never thought I'd see you here. The last time we were together was at Taishan Tavern," said Ma Yi with a smile. "Shenjing, I haven't seen you since the Lord sent you up to Taishan Mountain. How has your cultivation been going?" "Very well," said Yi Futian with a smile. "It makes me a little jealous how well they treat a Guqin master like you. Keep cultivating diligently," said Ma Yi. Then he turned to talk to Luoyue. Without realizing it, he was soon standing next to her, and they were walking together. Yi Futian smiled to himself when he saw this. He was like an open book. Mei Yi was incredibly competitive, but this was not something that he needed to worry about. "Shenjing," came another voice. A look of surprise came over Yi Futian's face. Since when had he been so popular here on Taishan Mountain? This time the people coming to welcome him were Li Jiyin and Chun Yu of Guqin Valley. Li Jiyin had played Flight of the Phoenix pair at String Palace. He was incredibly talented. Yi Futian smiled slightly and inclined his head. "How has it been cultivating at String Palace? Which of the 6 songs are you best at?" asked Li Jiyin. "Each of the 6 songs is deep and brilliant. I have only touched upon them as of now. I must put more effort into them all," said Yi Futian. "None of the 6 songs are simple, and becoming specialized in one of them is no easy thing. If you want to learn a lot about one of them, then I am afraid it will be difficult to get good at all of them. Given this situation, your best chance is to choose one song and work on it diligently," said Li Jiyin. "What you say is true, but given Shenjing's surroundings, I can't blame him. If I were in his place, I would want to study all the songs too," said Chun Yu with a smile. Li Jiyin agreed. If she were cultivating at the String Palace, it would probably be the same. She would want to study all 6 of the songs. But this was incredibly difficult. Yi Futian smiled and nodded. "Very well, I will keep that in mind." The others had no more to say, and so the people from Guqin Valley left him there. Yi Futian smiled ruefully. Would anyone else come and seek him out today? "It seems like you are very popular on Taishan Mountain," Little Phoenix whispered to him. Yi Futian rolled his eyes. "But although they're being polite to you, I can sense that there is another attitude as well," said Little Phoenix said gloatingly. "They are very protective of String Palace." Yi Futian naturally understood this. He had entered Taishan Mountain under the guise of a Guqin master, and had kept things low-key, humbly concealing his skill. Thus, although the disciples of Taishan Mountain were polite to him, they did not respect him that much and did not look at him as an equal. But Yi Futian did not mind this. After all, this was the result that he had hoped for, and he had worked to create this effect. Otherwise, how would he be able to cultivate in peace? "Great teacher and second teacher are coming," came an excited cry. Everyone made a path for them. The 2 of them were walking together. Everyone bowed to them, saying, "Greetings, great teacher." "Greetings, second teacher." They were the head teacher of Taishan Mountain and the city lord of Taishan City. The head teacher of Taishan Mountain stepped forward. His aura was exquisite, and there was a sense of majesty about him. He raised his hand and said, "Today Lord Taishan will teach us the way, so there is no need to be so polite towards us. We have come here to listen to him, just like all of you." "Yes, teacher." Everyone rose, but their gazes were still full of respect. Great teacher was such an important figure. His power was widely famed. It was said that he was on the same level as Lord Taishan, and was thus one of the most powerful figures in the higher heavens realm. Of course, no one was clear on exactly how strong he was. Not long after, String Emperor and the House Master of Taishan arrived, but not at the same time. One followed the other. String Emperor came first, and the House Master of Taishan came after. Most of the people there did not notice, but a few people understood what this meant. String Emperor walked to the front and bowed to the head teacher of Taishan and the city lord of Taishan City. "Greetings, brothers. There is no need to be so polite, brother. Please sit," said the head teacher of Taishan Mountain with a smile. String Emperor nodded and sat down. The house master of Taishan said nothing. He just sat down beside them. The 4 personal disciples were sitting in the very front row. At that moment, a figure slowly walked out of the palace. In a flash, everyone stood up and bowed, including the 4 great teachers. "Greetings, Lord Taishian," they all said. Everyone moved as one. The respect that they felt for him was plain on their faces. The fact that Lord Taishian was willing to teach them the way was enough to make him worthy of their respect. After all, in the face of a powerful figure like this, even saint-level people were little more than ants. Moreover, Lord Taishian would no longer take on new disciples. There was nothing that could be said to sway him on this. Thus, when he taught the way, the ones who were present would be the only ones to ever benefit from it. "Please be seated," said Lord Taishian to everyone. Everyone took their seats, and Lord Taishian sat on a rush hassock in front of them all. Although Yi Futian had been cultivating at Taishian Mountain for a while, this was the first time that he had seen Lord Taishian. He had white hair, a white beard and a cultivator's robe. He had the demeanor of a transcendent being, and he was so graceful that he seemed to not be of this world, but was rather a truly celestial being. Lord Taishian waved his hand, and suddenly a character was floating in the air in front of everyone. The way. The character was full of vigor and power, as if it had been written in the air by an ink pen. "What do you see here?" asked Lord Taishian. "A character." "The way," people answered. "Is that all?" asked Lord Taishian. Everyone looked at the character with a confused expression. They did not understand. All they could see was a character that read the way. Could it be that this character held some mysteries? They all released their divine spirits and perceived the character in detail. But though they could see it floating there, they could not feel any unusual aura coming from it. The vast area became incredibly quiet. "When I teach the way to you today, I will only speak of this character here," said Lord Taishian. "Can no one see anything else?" Everyone was still silent. No one could answer Lord Taishuan's question. "If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible." The people who were closest to Lord Taishian were naturally the 4 disciples that he taught personally. They looked at the character in front of them and sensed something, but they did not say anything. The people who were closest to Lord Taishian were naturally the 4 disciples that he taught personally. They looked at the character in front of them and sensed something, but they did not say anything. They were Lord Taishuan's personal disciples and had often heard their master teach. Today, the main focus was on the other disciples of Taishian Mountain. The character that read the way floated in the air above them. It looked normal, but also abnormal at the same time. But no one could really say what was abnormal about it. Yi Futian stared at the character as well, and his eyes slowly changed as his gaze grew deeper. In that vast space, the world all around him changed. He seemed to see endless beams of light floating between heaven and earth. The will of that character filled the air. He could see the changes of all things. What he was seeing was not a character, it was the way itself. However, he did not say anything. He just sat there quietly. Among all the disciples of Taishian Mountain here today, as a Guqin master, it was best if he said nothing. Although Yi Futian said nothing, it seemed that, at that moment, Lord Taishian sensed something. He looked over towards Yi Futian. Their gazes collided. Yi Futian found himself looking into an infinitely deep pair of eyes, so deep that they seemed to be filled with the way. But the feeling disappeared in an instant. He immediately averted his gaze, but he heard Lord Taishian say, "What is your name?" Yi Futian's heart began to beat faster. He told himself that he had been a little bit too careless. Lord Taishian was such a powerful figure, and his perception was so sharp. He had looked at the character through the eyes of meditation, and Lord Taishian had obviously been able to sense that. He rose and bowed, saying, "Greetings, my lord. My name is Shinjing." "Please sit, Shinjing," said Lord Taishian. "What did you see?" Many people looked at Yi Futian. They had no idea why Lord Taishian was asking Yi Futian this. Perhaps he had just randomly chosen someone from the crowd. Yi Futian was silent for a time. He did not know if he should speak or not. Seeing that he was silent, everyone's expressions changed. The house master of Taishian said, "Master, Shen Jing is a Guqin master that I brought up to Taishan Mountain. This character is profound and mysterious. How could he possibly answer you? That does not matter. You may answer freely. Lord Taishan seemed extremely kind and gentle as he looked at Yi Futian. I see the way, answered Yi Futian with a bow. As he said this, a strange look came over everyone's faces. Some of them even frowned. Would he really give such a simple answer? If he did not know, then he could just say that he did not know. The Lord had just randomly picked him, and he would not blame him if he got it wrong. Everyone could see that the character read the way. Everyone had already answered that. Lord Taishan had asked them what else they had seen, but Yi Futian had still answered that he saw the way. But as they were all thinking this, Lord Taishan asked another question. What way? This made a look of surprise come over everyone's faces. Lord Taishan had asked him another question. The way of swordsmanship, answered Yi Futian. Everyone was speechless when they heard this. Had he seen the way of swordsmanship? This Shen Jing. Do not say such foolish things. Yi Futian heard a voice in his mind. Someone was transmitting to him. It was Princess Luoyue. Although Lord Taishan would not mind. If Yi Futian spoke foolishly, it would still be bad. It would affect the people of Taishan Mountain's opinion of him. In that case, it would have negative effects on his future cultivating at Taishan Mountain, and it would not be easy for him to find a chance to become a disciple. Yi Futian had unknowingly helped her, and so she took the time to remind him of this. However, Yi Futian seemed not to hear her reminder. He sat there quietly, looking very calm, as if he was not distressed in the least. If Lord Taishan had casually chosen to ask him a question, then he would answer him casually. Lord Taishan nodded, then turned his gaze away from Yi Futian. He did not say whether he was right or wrong, but everyone could see that his questioning was over. Lord Taishan would not delve any deeper into Yi Futian's answer. After all, he had just been asking casually. At that moment, an aura bloomed from the character and flowed through the area. In a flash, the giant character became extraordinary, as an invisible wall covered Taishan Mountain. At that moment, it seemed as if the only thing that anyone could see was the character. How about now? What do you see? Lord Taishan asked everyone. Will, everyone answered. They all felt an incredibly powerful will that seemed to contain the will of the great path within it. This character was indeed supernatural. Lord Taishan nodded slightly and waved his hand again. The character floated up, and divine light shone from it, spreading down Taishan Mountain. The clouds in the sky changed color, and the will of all things became exceedingly clear. The light shone upon all of Taishan City. At that moment, countless people in Taishan City looked up to Mount Taishan, trembling within their hearts as they did so. As the light of the great path shone, they seemed to be able to see a character that read the way, and an old man who was as graceful and elegant as a celestial being. Lord Taishan. In that instant they all bowed, showing their respect to that figure. Inside themselves they were in turmoil. Was Lord Taishan teaching the way? Countless saint-level figures were sitting there, diligently sensing everything. Lord Taishan was transmitting the way into Taishan City, letting them all feel that the way was everywhere. The people on Taishan Mountain could feel it the most clearly. They seemed to be able to see everything in the world. The true fire of the sun fell, and water flowed to the deep places of the earth. Invisible space was everywhere. They saw flowers blooming and dying, and they saw demonic beasts riding the winds high up in the sky. They could feel the wind flowing around them. This is the great path of all things. Everyone's hearts trembled. At that moment, their perception of everything became incomparably clear. It seemed as if they could see through things to their true nature. How about now? Lord Taishan asked again. Everyone was still silent, but they were shaking. In that instant, an even more powerful aura spread out. Lord Taishan's form seemed not to be real. A phantom appeared up in the sky, and soon, it was everywhere at once. The character that read the way was linking everything together. At that moment, the marvelous will expanded even more. It spread out from the vast Taishan City all throughout the Taishan region. In the distance, the people of Taishan City were looking up into the sky, and their hearts were trembling wildly. Was this the aura of a god? Everything in the world became clearer. The people in Taishan saw countless images. They were images of everything in the world. What is the way? Lord Taishan was no longer asking what everyone saw. He was asking what the way was. No one lights the sun and the moon, and yet they burn brightly. No one arranges the stars, and yet they are well ordered. No one creates beasts, and yet they are born. No one stirs up the wind, and yet it blows. No one pushes the waters, and yet they flow. No one plants the trees and grass, and yet they grow. You do not try to breathe, and yet you do. You do not make your heart beat, and yet it does. Lord Taishan seemed to be speaking to himself. Everything in the world is born into something, or into nothing. Everything in the world has its reasons for moving. We humans cultivate the way in order to chase after these rules. However, the higher the level you cultivate to, the more you feel your own insignificance. Saints feel like they have grasped the way, but they have only touched one corner of it. Seeing some of these rules and operations is called understanding the way, and is called sainthood. Everyone on Taishan Mountain who heard these words felt a little ashamed, especially those who were proud and thought of themselves as cultivators. At that moment, they truly felt their own insignificance. Cultivation is hard. Becoming a saint is very hard, and becoming a Renhuang is even harder. But although I say it is hard, at the same time, it is not hard. When you understand the way and understand the motions of the sun and the moon, then you will shine along with them. When you understand the motions of the stars, you will move along with them. But are the sun and moon and stars, and everything in the world well ordered? If they are not ordered, how can you understand their changes? Although the way is but one word, it is incredibly difficult to see through. Lord Taishan sighed, and his sigh seemed to cause the sun, moon, and stars to move. He stood up and waved his hand, leaving a deep impression on the peak of Taishan Mountain. Far away in Taishan City, countless people could still see the character. My lord, everyone's hearts were trembling. Master, even Lord Taishuan's 4 disciples looked shocked as they looked at him. Is the master going to break through to the next level? Said the head teacher of Taishan. Suddenly, everyone's hearts beat even faster. If Lord Taishan was going to break through to the next level, what level would that be? That's out of the question. It is just that in these past few years of cultivation, I have had a feeling. I am teaching the way today for the sake of teaching it to you. But at the same time, I am teaching myself, said Lord Taishan. I must spend a period of time locked away in cultivation. I will stay here on Taishan Mountain and guard it for you, master, said the head teacher. The other 3 stood as well and bowed. They would all stay on the mountain and guard it for him. Lord Taishan nodded slightly, then turned to leave. With a single step he disappeared. Everyone on Taishan Mountain was still looking at the character that read the way. The character contained the actual will of the Great Path. And it was not only the people on Taishan Mountain who were looking at it. In Taishan City and all throughout the Taishan region, everyone was looking across the vast distance towards the mountain. The character filled all their visions. Let us go to Taishan Mountain, they all thought. They all made their preparations to set out for the mountain. At that moment, as far away from Taishan Mountain as could be, in an elegant hall in Shangxiao Divine Palace, a figure opened his eyes. His gaze seemed to pierce across the vast distance. Lord Taishan, he whispered. And it was not only in Shangxiao Divine Palace. At that moment, many people in the higher heavens realm felt something. They all immediately set out towards Taishan Mountain. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. The whole Taishan region was shaken. None of them knew what had happened, but when they looked up, they could see a character that read the way flashing in their eyes. The whole Taishan region was shaken. None of them knew what had happened, but when they looked up, they could see a character that read the way flashing in their eyes. Something incredibly important must have happened on Taishan Mountain. Countless cultivators headed over there. Within Taishan City, cultivators were walking towards the mountain from all directions, as quickly as they could. They flew on the wind and rode on swords, their hearts trembling fiercely. Those few Renhuang-level figures among them were even more disturbed. They could faintly feel that Lord Taishian was possibly about to enter a new level. Once he did this, the whole higher heavens realm would be shaken. Of course, the most shocked were still the cultivators upon Taishian Mountain. Lord Taishian had said that he would lock himself away in cultivation. The head teacher of Taishian Mountain, speaking for the 4 great disciples, had said that they would guard Taishian Mountain for him. What did this mean? All the disciples felt their hearts beating quickly. Even Yi Futian felt his heart fluttering. Lord Taishian was already at the very peak of the Runhuang level. Yet there was still more for him to learn. If he broke through to a new level, would that be the level that Gu Tianxing had broken through to all those years ago? The people of the higher heavens realm did not know either. But after Gu Tianxing, no one in the Heavenly Mandate dynasty had reached that level. It was said that the old dynasty overlord had possibly been close to, or had even reached that level, but that he had been slain by Gu Tianxing in battle, and had grievously wounded Gu Tianxing at the same time. After these 2 great figures fell, the Heavenly Mandate dynasty never again had any figures at their level. The current dynasty overlord of the Heavenly Mandate dynasty, and the Lady of Brahma's pure sky had not reached this level yet. Yi Futian could only imagine what would happen when Lord Taishian reached this level. He looked at the floating character, and his gaze seemed to fall deep into it. Just this single character was enough to make them understand. This was truly how to teach the way. The city lord of Taishian looked behind him at everyone and said, "All of you cultivate on your own in order to understand this." Then the 4 disciples walked away towards where Lord Taishian was shut away. Everyone else was left there, looking at the character. They were unable to calm the storm raging inside all of them. "Is Lord Taishian going to break through to the next level?" someone asked. "Very possibly. You might just make it to a new level," someone answered. "He is already at the very peak of his current level." Everyone nodded. Given Lord Taishuan's current level, he could only look up. "Shenjing, did you truly see the way of swordsmanship before?" someone asked Yi Futian. It was Wan Shuyi, a disciple of Sword Abyss. Previously, he had not seen anything in particular. The character contained all the myriad things in the world, and all the laws of motions of the earth. Thus, any answer that he could have given would have been fine. Now it seemed like Yi Futian had said that the way of swordsmanship was the right answer. His heart was set on swords, and so he had seen the way of swordsmanship. Before, most people had ignored his answer, but now it seemed like they were having second thoughts. Could it be that this Guqin master, who had been brought up to Taishian Mountain by 4th sister, was also an incredibly talented swordsman, and had seen a strand of sword wool within the character? These days, I have been observing the swordsmanship of Sword Abyss, seeing how skilled its cultivators are, and this has been imprinted in my mind. Thus, when I looked at the character, I seemed to see some sword will, said Yi Futian. Wan Shuyi nodded. Yi Futian's answer seemed reasonable enough. He knew that Yi Futian had indeed been spending a lot of time at Sword Abyss. He went there to observe every day. He had probably watched them so much that he had swords on the brain. The others all relaxed. If this were the case, they could understand what had happened. Even if that is so, why did the cultivators of Sword Abyss not see swords? Someone asked at that moment. This made them all go pale. They turned to look at who had spoken. Junmu. Many people looked surprised when they saw him. He was the head teacher of Taishuan's disciple Junmu. When Yi Futian had first come up Taishian Mountain, Junmu had left an impression on him the first time he saw him. Do you remember me, Brother Shin? Junmu walked up to Yi Futian and smiled. Yi Futian nodded. How could I forget such a memorable figure? So it must have been fate that I saw you coming up to Taishian Mountain, said Junmu with a smile. Fourth uncle brought you up to Taishian Mountain, and Elder Lan let you enter String Palace. Now, third brother has returned, and you are still cultivating in String Palace. Apparently, you are worthy of third brother's favor. Now you are able to see the way of swordsmanship within that character. Why should you be so modest? I think that you must be outstanding in some way, and you have just been humble and restrained. Junmu's words made everyone look back at Yi Futian. Could it be that he had been downplaying his own abilities? If so, then he was incredibly clever. You are exaggerating, Brother Jun. All of the disciples of Taishian Mountain are incredible. Thus, I must be humble and restrained while I am here. Moreover, I have no right to boast. Fourth sister brought me here, and has been very good to me, and so I must concentrate on cultivation. Yi Futian was neither haughty nor humble. He simply and calmly answered Junmu. Well, now you have been cultivating on Taishan Mountain for a while. Have you had any success? Asked Junmu. I have benefited greatly from my time here, said Yi Futian with a nod. I once said that if I got the chance, I would like to enjoy your music. I wonder if I might take this opportunity to listen to you play. Junmu had been smiling all along, but everyone could feel a different sort of atmosphere. Some of the older folks understood what was going on, but the younger people were not clear on why Junmu was being this way. It seemed that he wanted to make Shenjing do something, but what was it that he wanted to see? Did he want to see if he was strong, or if he was weak? All the disciples of Taishan Mountain heard Lord Taishan teach the way today. I was fortunate enough to be here as well, and so my heart is full. How could I dare to play a song here on Taishan Mountain now? Everyone would laugh at me, said Yi Futian with a slight bow. Farewell. Will you really be so disrespectful to me? Said Junmu coldly. An invisible pressure spread out from him, and fell upon Yi Futian. I must ask you to satisfy my curiosity once again. Yi Futian felt the pressure falling upon him, and said, Lord Taishan is shut away, and the 4 elders have gone to guard him. I am very grateful to fourth sister for bringing me here to cultivate, but I am just a Guqin master of String Palace. I would not dare fight the disciple of the head teacher of Taishan. If you insist on fighting me, I will be ashamed of my own inadequacy, and yet I will have to bear it. Everyone looked surprised. This Shenjing was very frank. He would not fight back, but given how powerful Junmu was, fighting back would be meaningless anyway. Junmu, why are you antagonizing Shenjing? Asked Wan Shui. If you want to test yourself, there are many disciples here on Taishan Mountain. Why have you sought out Shenjing? Said Princess Luoyue. She was a little bit upset. She kind of knew why Junmu was putting pressure on Yi Futian. Now that the elders were occupied, the disciples could do what they wanted. Junmu smiled slightly when he heard what they were all saying. He bowed to Yi Futian and said, Forgive my rudeness. As he said this, his aura dissipated. He turned and sat down, his gaze fixed upon the character that read the way. Why don't you go, Shenjing? Said Wan Shui to Yi Futian. Princess Luoyue looked at him as well. Yi Futian nodded. Farewell, he said with a bow, and then turned and left. Junmu had tried to force him into a fight, but his heart was as calm as still water. He was not distressed at all. He still remembered his identity. At Taishan Mountain, he was just a Guqin master. How could he fight one of the disciples of the head teacher of Taishan? What would he do if he won? When he returned to String Palace, Yi Futian looked back up at the character that floated high above Taishan Mountain. However, at that moment, a figure appeared beside him. It was Little Phoenix. She looked at Yi Futian and said, Why did you yield? Although she often quarreled with Yi Futian, she and he had become very familiar with each other after spending so much time together. She knew how talented he was. He had been successful in cultivating the 6 famous songs and the fleeting divine sword. How many people on Taishan Mountain could say the same? Yi Futian smiled and said, Are you worried for me? Little Phoenix looked at him with disdain and said, I've just never seen you be so cowardly. Yi Futian laughed and shook his head. Little Phoenix, your personality is terrible, but you have a good heart. Your parents are a little fierce, but they have never been that way to me. And String Emperor and fourth sister have been so good to me. Why should I have gotten into a fight over such a trivial matter? That would just be giving in to my personal feelings. Today was the first time he had seen Lord Taishan, and he had met with String Emperor only a few times, and had talked with him very little. And it was the same with fourth sister. But he was still grateful for the way they had treated him. Compared to that, the affair with Junmu was not even worth mentioning. Alright, I am going to cultivate. Yi Futian sat cross-legged, and looked up at the huge character. The process of freedom meditation began, and his eyes became incomparably deep as his gaze pierced through the air towards the character. At that moment, Yi Futian could faintly feel his soul leaving his body. It entered into the realm of the way that floated in the air. A voice appeared in Yi Futian's head. All things are either born into something or into nothingness. No matter whether or not you could feel it, the way was there. It was everywhere. Yi Futian seemed to be able to feel the ordered sequence of everything in the world from that character. His will stretched out continuously into the distance. He saw all of Taishan Mountain, and then continued downwards. He saw countless figures heading towards the mountain, as well as the chaos within the mountain. On New Year's Day of the 10,031st year of the Divine Prefecture calendar, countless figures had gathered below Taishan Mountain. This had led to a huge disturbance within Taishan City. Many of the people there were powerful figures, including some of the top figures of the higher heavens realm. On the first day of the year, an invitation came down from Taishan Mountain. All the people from the top forces were invited up onto the mountain to meet with Lord Taishan. Lord Taishuan's 4 disciples were standing outside Taishan Palace and looking over the invitations. The signature on each of these invitations was enough to cause a sensation throughout the higher heavens realm. "Why have you done this, brother?" said the city lord of Taishan to the head teacher. At that moment, the great figures of the realm were handing them their invitations. If they ignored them, it would be impolite. "Our friends have come from far away. How can we be impolite to them?" said the head teacher. "We must invite them up the mountain and set up a feast for them." "Won't this disturb our master's cultivation?" asked the city lord of Taishan. "I agree with our brother. Since these people are here, why don't we invite them to come up the mountain?" said String Emperor. The city lord of Taishan glanced at him, but did not reply immediately. "In that case, I will go and make arrangements," said the city lord of Taishan after a while. Then he turned and left. "If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible." On the first day of the 10,031st year of the Divine Prefecture calendar, the usually very peaceful Taishan Mountain shook all of the higher heavens realm. On the first day of the 10,031st year of the Divine Prefecture calendar, the usually very peaceful Taishan Mountain shook all of the higher heavens realm. It was announced that everyone who had come could go up the mountain. For a time, countless cultivators were climbing the mountain. Taishan Mountain was vast, so even though they had come from all directions, it was still not too crowded. Most of the people who had come were from the Taishan region. They had come with a desire to advance towards sainthood. After all, this was the holy land of the Taishan region. Moreover, Lord Taishan was shut away cultivating, trying to break through to the next level. Was it possible that he could do this? And if he did, what would happen? Would Lord Taishan start a whole new school of thought? Shangxiao Divine Palace was, without a doubt, the most influential force in the higher heavens realm, as they had countless powerful figures, and taught people from all over the world. So they had trained countless heroes. Many of the top families would send their younger members to Shangxiao Divine Palace to cultivate, and even some people from other realms would make the journey here, sending their younger members to seek the path. Thus, when talking about influence, Shangxiao Divine Palace was certainly worthy of being called the most influential force in the higher heavens realm. In addition to them, several other forces stood at the peak. Compared to them, Taishan Mountain was not so brilliant, even though Lord Taishan was so powerful. The Taishan region was not that big. This was because Lord Taishan had not set up his own school of thought. He had only taken 4 disciples. And it was only because his own disciple, the Taishan Hierophant, had set up his own school, that the Taishan region had expanded at all. Many of the cultivators in the Taishan region had thoughts about this situation. They hoped that Lord Taishuan's influence would increase, and that he would take on more disciples, giving them a chance to go to Taishan Mountain to cultivate. Now, if Lord Taishan had a chance to advance a step, his influence would certainly increase. This would shake the higher heavens realm. If he started his own school of thought, then cultivators would flock to him. That was obvious from what was happening now. Countless people looked up at the character that read the way floating above Mount Taishan. They seemed to be able to see the way of all things. It was an incredibly magical feeling, which was enough to make them stare in wonder for a long time. But right now Taishan Mountain was not a good place for cultivating. Too many cultivators had come. At that moment, everyone saw a group of figures coming forward. It was Lord Taishuan's 3 disciples besides the Taishian Hierophant. The city lord of Taishian was at the forefront. They walked towards a group of figures with powerful auras. One could tell how extraordinary they were at a glance. The people from the divine palace, someone whispered. He recognized who this group was. Some of the great figures of the divine palace had come here to Taishian Mountain along with their disciples. It seemed that Lord Taishuan's actions had truly shaken the higher heavens realm. "Greetings, Lord of the Divine Music Palace," said the city lord of Taishian with a slight bow. The old man who was in charge of the divine palace had deep eyes and wore a silver robe. He truly looked like he was the palace lord of the divine music palace. "No need to be so polite," said the palace lord of the divine music palace. His tone was cool. Although he said that there was no need to be so polite, he accepted the politeness quite naturally. After all, it was due to his station. "How is Lord Taishuan's cultivation going?" he asked. This was the question on everyone's mind. Had Lord Taishian broken through to the next level? Right now he is locked away. Our brother is guarding him. We are not sure how his cultivation is going at this moment, answered the city lord of Taishian. "We have prepared a feast on Taishian Mountain. Please come with us." On saying this, the city lord of Taishian led the way. The palace lord of Divine Music Palace followed behind him with all his disciples. Afterward, the cultivators of many top forces arrived one after another. The city lord of Taishian greeted them all politely. At that moment, a powerful aura spread through the air. Everyone looked up and saw golden light falling, brilliant to the extreme. They all covered their eyes with their hands, leaving only cracks so they could look up into the sky. A group of brilliant figures was descending amidst the dazzling light. The divine nation. Everyone's hearts trembled when they saw these figures. Even people from powerful families were stunned. There was an incredibly old family in the eastern part of the higher heavens realm, who called themselves descendants of the gods. Golden blood flowed through their veins, and they were full of so much vitality that it was said that they could not die, and their bodies could not be destroyed. They had founded an ancient nation in the east, the Golden Divine Nation. The Golden Divine Nation was the absolute overlord of the eastern portion of the higher heavens realm. Their power was beyond compare. But the people who had come were not the rulers of the Divine Nation, just some of the top figures. They were the divine generals of the Divine Nation. According to rumors, there was another top figure of the Divine Nation, who was a general under Donghuang the Great of the Divine Prefecture. The Divine Nation had gone to war on Donghuang the Great's behalf, and had achieved great victories. Now they had treasures that had been gifted to them by Donghuang himself, which made the Divine Nation a force to be reckoned with. They were truly awe-inspiring. The crowd parted to let them pass. The cultivators of the Golden Divine Nation stepped forward, and the city lord of Taishian and the others rose to greet them. They were a little bit distressed by this. They had not thought that Lord Taishian locking himself away would have caused such a stir, that top forces like Shangxiao Divine Palace and the Golden Divine Nation would come here. "Where is Lord Taishian?" came an overpowering voice. Everyone on Mount Taishian frowned and looked towards where the voice had come from. They saw a group of figures in black robes coming towards them. All of them had incredibly imposing demeanor, and their bodies were surrounded by fierce auras. This was especially true of the man at their head. An overwhelming sense of power covered him from head to toe. The city lord of Taishian and the others all watched them, and their expressions changed slightly. So they had come as well. The Luo family of the divine capital of Xiling. All the cultivators on Taishian Mountain were shaken. Another top force had arrived, and it was the prince of the divine capital of Xiling himself, Luo Chongyang, who had come personally. The prince of the divine capital of Xiling had been cultivating for many years, and was very powerful. Although he was only a prince, he was still a top figure. Plus, his father was old demon Luo. The two of them were absolutely dominant, and no one dared question their majesty. The Luo family of the divine capital of Xiling controlled a vast area. Old demon Luo was not there, and no one knew if he was coming or not. But Luo Chongyang was there, and that was enough to make people take notice. No wonder he had dared to directly ask where Lord Taixian was as soon as he arrived. This was Luo Chongyang, and there was nothing strange about that. I am Luo Chongyang of the divine capital of Xiling. I have heard that Lord Taixian is teaching the way, and I have come to pay a visit to him, he said clearly. His voice was very loud, and it rang throughout Mount Taixian, making a look of surprise come over everyone's face. The people of the Taixian region were a bit upset. Was he trying to disturb Lord Taishuan's cultivation? But he was Luo Chongyang, so they did not dare say anything against him. Luo Chongyang, if you are going to be so rude, then get off the mountain, came a voice from a distance. Everyone looked to where it had come from, and saw a figure emerge from the depths of Taixian Mountain. It was the Taixian Hierophant. His aura was overpowering as he walked towards Luo Chongyang with a cold expression. You are mighty indeed, Hierophant, said Luo Chongyang with a bright and honest smile. I have come to visit Lord Taixian. Am I not welcome? He is shut away cultivating right now. If you have come to visit him, you will have to wait quietly. My brothers will attend to you, said the Taixian Hierophant coldly. How long until he comes out? Asked Luo Chongyang. I don't know, said the Taixian Hierophant. How long will I have to wait? If Lord Taixian is going to break the shackles of orthodoxy, why wouldn't he want the people of the world to witness it and admire his magnificence? Luo Chongyang had obviously not just come to pay a visit to Lord Taixian. The Luo family of the divine capital of Xiling did not have a friendly relationship with Taixian Mountain. Now Lord Taixian was possibly about to break through to the next level, and it was natural that they would be worried about this. Luo Chongyang had probably come to Taixian Mountain to make trouble. He wanted to disrupt Lord Taixian, thereby preventing him from breaking through to the next level. That is for Lord Taixian to decide, Luo Chongyang, not for you, said the Taixian Hierophant coldly. At that moment, all the people on Taixian Mountain could see that Luo Chongyang had come for a nefarious purpose. Indeed, said Luo Chongyang with a smile. He looked up at the giant character that read the way, and said, Lord Taixian is clearly at a higher level than any of us. He carved a character into Taixian Mountain, and taught the way to all of these disciples. He must have created many powerful figures today. I did not come to disturb him, but I would be so bored just sitting here. I always need to have something to do. You all go and test how powerful the disciples of Taixian Mountain are. Make sure to seek out their advice and see your own flaws. As you command, my prince. As he said this, the figures behind him stepped forward towards the disciples of Taixian Mountain. This made the people who had come from around the Taixian region look a little worried. Luo Chongyang had indeed come to make trouble. There was no question of it. He had directly asked the people he had brought with him from the divine capital of Xiling to get into fights. Nominally, they were just asking for advice, but in reality, they were going to provoke and challenge the people there to cause a disturbance. The powerful cultivators stepped forward, their mighty auras sweeping out. The people from the divine capital of Xiling were about to start fighting. They were worthy indeed of being old demon Luo's messengers. The disciples of Taixian Mountain all looked at the Taixian Hierophant and saw that his expression was cold. His robes flapped in the wind. His mighty aura bloomed, but Luo Chongyang just smiled at him. He looked like he was just waiting for him to attack. He had asked his juniors to challenge the disciples of Taixian Mountain. If a Runhuang-level figure attacked, he would naturally have to fight back. A battle between Runhuang-level figures could easily cause Taixian Mountain to collapse. Lord Taishuan's cultivation would be disrupted, and he would not break through to the next level. Boom! At that moment, the cultivators from the divine capital of Xiling launched their attacks. A dark death airflow flowed through the air, and overpowering demonic power swept out. Their attack power was overwhelming and carried fierce killing power with it. They were not holding anything back. They were not just testing themselves. I'm still waiting to see what you do, said the Taixian Hierophant coldly. Suddenly, all the saint-level cultivators of Taixian Mountain released their auras one by one and stepped forward. At that moment, a chaotic battle broke out on Taixian Mountain. At that time, Futian was still cultivating in String Palace. His will seemed to be immersed in the character, and he could feel the will of the great path. At the same time, he could naturally feel what was happening on Taishan Mountain. There were those who did not want Lord Taishan to break through to the next level, and so they had found an excuse to attack. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. A chaotic battle had broken out upon Taishan Mountain. A group of saint-level cultivators had begun fighting wildly. A chaotic battle had broken out upon Taishan Mountain. A group of saint-level cultivators had begun fighting wildly. The cultivators of the divine capital of Xiling had overwhelming attack power, and there was a sense of excitement about them. It seemed that they would not show any mercy. At that moment, at a certain place among all the chaos, a cultivator from the divine capital of Xiling stepped through the air. Demonic power rolled and broiled around him. An airflow of death surrounded him, and a demonic image floated behind him, which was frightening to behold. He struck out with his fist. His opponent brought his hands together to block him, but fist will pierce through his guard. A terrible dark airflow penetrated him. In a flash, countless dark airflows appeared upon the cultivator from Taishan Mountain. Death will was infecting his body. The people from Taishan Mountain all looked shocked. The cultivators from the divine capital of Xiling were not being polite in the least. A fist swept out, and there was a loud noise as the cultivator from Taishan Mountain's internal organs shook. His body was filled with deadly qi as he was sent flying back and landed on the ground. This is ruthless. The cultivators of Taishan Mountain began to look angry as they beheld this scene. The man stepped forward and thrust out his fist again, wounding the man in front of him. No one could stop him. He is the prince of the divine capital of Xiling, Luo Yuming. Someone had recognized the saint-level figure who was attacking. He was another one of the princes of the divine capital of Xiling. He was incredibly strong. At that moment, he walked towards Luo Yuming. He struck out, and his fist collided with Luo Yuming's. Just when everyone thought he would be sent flying backward, they saw that the figure was unmoved. Both of their wills burst forth, and the air around them seemed to be shattered. They stepped back at the same time. Junmu. The disciples of Taishan Mountain looked at the man who had stepped forward. It was the disciple of the Taishan Hierophant Junmu, but his face had turned ugly after he had stepped back. Death currents were raging through him, infecting his vitality. Luo Yuming smiled at Junmu and said, "You'll do." On saying this, he stepped forward, and the two of them began to fight. While that was going on, other battles were breaking out all over the place, leaving the onlookers astonished. The cultivators of the divine capital of Xiling were at a disadvantage in terms of numbers, but they pressed forward and took a commanding position on the battlefield. They had obviously prepared for this. One could see the disparity in power between the two sides, but there was nothing unusual about this. The divine capital of Xiling was a great power, and Lord Taishan had not founded his own school of thought. After the four great disciples had succeeded at making names for themselves, Taishan Mountain had no more figures who had the potential to become famous throughout the higher heavens realm. After all, Taishan Mountain was not that kind of holy land. In that respect, Shangxiao Divine Palace was naturally the strongest holy land. The Taishan Hierophant and the others watched the battle with dark looks on their faces. Their master was shut away, cultivating at the moment, and they had had a feeling that someone would come to make trouble. Thus, they had been left here to guard Taishan Mountain for him. And indeed people had come. The divine capital of Xiling had come. Luo Chongyang had been staring at the Taishan Hierophant all along. It was as if he was waiting for him to act. He wanted to take on this great challenge. However, the Taishan Hierophant was quiet and contained his anger. Even as he saw many of the disciples of Taishan Mountain be wounded, he said nothing. He had a calm expression on his face. Lord Taishan personally taught them the way, yet the disciples of Taishan Mountain are nothing to write home about. Luo Chongyang said as he swept his gaze over the battlefield. There was a bit of disdain in his voice that made the disciples of Taishan Mountain feel humiliated. Wan Shui and the disciples of Sword Abyss pressed forward with their swords, cutting through the cultivators of the divine capital of Xiling like bamboo, and wounding many of them. But a group of their opponents came forward. A hand swiped through the air, and in a flash, countless dark death currents pierced through the air like sharp swords, forming a terrifying death storm. Humph! A sword cut through the sky. Wan Shuyi's body became phantom-like as he cut among the cultivators of the divine capital of Xiling. Blood flowed from their bodies, and they were sent flying backward as they were wounded by his swordsmanship. At that moment, a massive demonic image appeared in front of him. Two massive demonic cultivator hands materialized, and in a flash, 3,000 death currents pierced through the sky towards Wan Shuyi. An afterimage of Wan Shuyi appeared as he shot forward. He slashed his sword, using the cleave of all things. He collided with his opponent and became tangled up with him. At the same time, the other cultivators of the divine cultivator of Xiling formed seals. The demonic seal of death descended from the sky, pressing down on the disciples of Sword Abyss. The disciples of Sword Abyss were scattered in an instant, and many of them were wounded. Luoyue was on the battlefield as well. She was forced to retreat. One cultivator seemed to be staring at her. Countless death currents snaked through the air, covering her within them. She stood there holding her sword while shrieking all around her. The demonic cultivator from the divine capital of Xiling stared at her with a cold smile. He formed a seal with his hands, and suddenly countless death currents shot out like swords towards her. Whoosh! Sword will swept through the sky as Luoyue's figure flashed. The images of thousands of swords appeared, and they collided with the death currents that were rushing towards her wildly. The fleeting divine sword, whispered the cultivator from the divine capital of Xiling. What an excellent sword method. Unfortunately, your swordsmanship still needs some work. As he said this, demonic power billowed up into the sky. He pointed down, and in a flash, the countless black death currents seemed to transform into deadly spears. They shot down towards Luoyue wildly. She flung her sword away, and used her now free hands to form a seal. Countless sword images appeared and spiraled upwards. Her attack smashed into his. But in the end, her swordsmanship was overwhelmed, and Luoyue was smashed down towards the ground. Finally, her sword returned to her hands. She gripped it, and sword light burned as a sword curtain spread out around her. Bang! 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 The attacks continued to fall. She was forced further and further down. Finally, she groaned and her face turned pale. Boom! There was a loud noise as Luoyue set foot on the ground, her face white as a sheet. Divine light bloomed as she summoned her sword life spirit. It melded with the sword in her hands, and a beam of divine radiance flashed. The sword cut through the air, and in a flash, everything in front of her was shattered. At the same time, blood was flowing from the corner of her mouth. The sword cut into the cultivator from the divine capital of Xiling, and his face quickly became very solemn. He stepped through the air, and demonic figures appeared, covering the sky. They tried to cover Luoyue. Go! Luoyue's sword cut through the air, shining brilliantly. But all the demon images attacked at once, and the deadly spears fell upon the sword as well. There were also overwhelming palm prints that made the sword stop in mid-air shaking. Every time it shook, more blood flowed from Luoyue's mouth, and her face grew paler and paler. Cold wool bloomed from the city lord of Taishuan's body as he beheld this scene. His daughter was being attacked, and he was not about to just let that go. His power surged, but at the same time, a Runhuang-level figure from the divine capital of Xiling released his power as well. It seemed that if he got involved, the cultivator of the divine capital of Xiling would attack him immediately. Boom! There was a burst of incredibly sharp air that seemed impossible to suppress. It seemed that if his opponent dared to do anything, the city lord of Taishuan would attack him as well. Within String Palace, Yi Futian's will seem to link up with the character that read the way. He could clearly see the battle on Taishuan Mountain. Many of the disciples of Sword Abyss had been wounded, and Luoyue was being suppressed. Taishuan Mountain had no conflict with the outside world, and did not train its disciples as part of a faction. But even though the tree may crave serenity, the wind would not stop. Just because they did not have any conflicts, did not mean that others did not have conflicts with them. He looked at the character on the peak of Taishuan Mountain, and could feel the great path of all things. He could feel the flow of the aura of all things between heaven and earth. At that moment, a sword appeared in his eyes. A sword seemed to appear within the giant character as well. The atmosphere on Taishan Mountain became very harsh. Everyone was watching Luoyue's battle. The daughter of the city lord of Taishan seemed to have already been pushed to her limit. Blood stained her robes. However, her eyes were still filled with a cold determination. Sword will covered her until her body seemed to be made out of swords. She shot up into the sky, forming sword seals with her hands. Sword will shrieked through the air. It seemed that she would still fight. Whoosh! Sword will shot through the air above her. A terrible, harsh sword formed, and many other swords began to materialize. After the first sword, another came, and then a third. In a flash, there were countless swords in the air above Luoyue. What is going on? The city lord of Taishan was stunned. Those swords. It was not only him. Everyone else looked surprised as well. Luoyue still had a trick up her sleeve. But surprisingly, a look of confusion came over Luoyue's face as well. These were not the swords that she had summoned. Cut! She cried out and released her sword. But at the moment she yelled this, countless swords moved at the same time, forming a line as they cut through the air. The huge line of swords transformed into a worldly prison of swordsmanship. The cultivator from the Shangxiao Divine Palace looked surprised. He cried out, and demonic will billowed from him. The death currents transformed into spears and shot out. Crack! The spears were destroyed in an instant. Countless swords cut into the space where he was standing. It looked like countless crosses crashing into each other. The cleave of all things. It was the cleave of all things, the second strike of the fleeting divine sword. And it was perfect. It was the best possible interpretation of the strike. Even Wan Shuyi could not have displayed such a perfect cleave of all things. Was Luoyue transforming in the middle of battle? There was a terrible cry as the cultivator of Shangxiao Divine Palace was pierced by countless cries. He was covered in blood, and his aura weakened. He seemed to have been completely crippled. He fell to the ground, looking like he was in a daze. What a powerful sword! All the cultivators on Taishan Mountain were looking at Luoyue. The city lord of Taishuan's daughter was really this outstanding? So why had she been losing earlier? Had she been hiding her power? Or had she just made it to the next level? Some of the Renhuang level cultivators felt that something was not right, but none of them could say specifically what it was. They looked up at the character that read the way. It seemed that a burst of power had put the character into motion, and it was resonating with heaven and earth, and sword will was spreading out from it. Had Luoyue done this? What is going on? The city lord of Taishan had some doubts in his heart as well. This did not seem like a sword that Luoyue could have summoned, and he was also having a mystical feeling. He looked at his daughter. She herself looked a little bit confused by all of this. She seemed very surprised by that sword. It was not hers. But the sword was truly powerful. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. The cultivator from the divine capital of Shilling frowned slightly. Many of the fighters looked over to where Luoyue was. Death will wrapped around the cultivator from the divine capital of Shilling. There was a cold look in his dark eyes. The cultivator from the divine capital of Shilling frowned slightly. Many of the fighters looked over to where Luoyue was. Death will wrapped around the cultivator from the divine capital of Shilling. There was a cold look in his dark eyes. You truly are the daughter of Lord Taishuan's second disciple. What are you all looking at? Get back to fighting. When Luo Chongyang roared this, the other cultivators suddenly stepped forward towards where Luoyue was. As she stood there, Luoyue could feel an intense amount of pressure. Boom! Several of the cultivators stepped forward, and Luoyue seemed to be able to feel the power of a god of death in the air. Invisible death was spreading through her body, infecting her. But she saw that the powerful sword in the air above her was still circling. She formed a sword seal, and in a flash, a formless brilliance emitted from the giant character that read the way on the peak of Taishan Mountain. Sword will formed all around her until a terrifying storm of sword chi appeared. It swept through the sky. At that moment, Luoyue realized that the person who had helped her was still there, helping her in secret. She did not hesitate. She gripped her sword and pointed it up into the sky. In a flash, countless divine swords whistled through the sky, leaving streaks in the air. Many of the cultivators of the divine capital of Xiling looked surprised. They released their powerful demonic will to block the onrushing sword will. The countless swords cut through the air. It seemed like the entire area would be shattered by the storm of sword chi. Crack, crack, crack. Lines of blood flew through the air, and many cultivators cried out bitterly. All of the cultivators who had been coming to attack Luoyue had been grievously wounded. They were covered in blood, and they fell limply to the ground. Luoyue's battle had taken a lot of the pressure off the other disciples of Sword Abyss. Wan Shuyi looked at her in shock. He had cultivated the second strike of the fleeting divine sword, the cleave of all things, for many years and still did not fully understand it. Now Luoyue had used this technique. She must have reached a new level. Moreover, she had used the will of the worldly great path to resonate with the character that read the way. This showed how prodigiously talented she was. When had Sister Luoyue gotten so strong? Who is helping her secretly? Why can't I see you? Luo Chongyang swept his gaze over the giant character that read the way. His expression was cold. Given his level, he was able to sense that this was not Luoyue's sword. The daughter of the city lord of Taishan was just not that good. He sent some people to surround her. He wanted to see if the one who was secretly helping her would act again, so he could pinpoint his location. But he discovered that the hiding person was using his will to interact with the character that read the way, floating at the peak of Taishan Mountain. He was unable to find out where the man was by using his spiritual will. Many people were cultivating on Taishan Mountain and had not come here. However, there was no one there at the nirvana level. They were all contemplating the character, and people who were below the nirvana level did not have the ability to do this. Even nirvana-level figures would have trouble doing this. Thus, his level was not high enough to find the person. A look of surprise came over everyone's face when they heard Luo Chongyang's words. They were stunned. Was this really not Luoyue's sword? Someone was helping her secretly. But who could produce such brilliant swordsmanship from a secret position? This was a sword that was able to use the second strike of the fleeting divine sword, the cleave of all things. Even Wan Shuyi could not do this. Didn't you want to test the power of the disciples of Taishan Mountain? Do they have to stand right in front of you for you to test their power? The Taishan Hierophant said to Luo Chongyang. He also did not know who it was, but it was not important. What was important was that they had gained a little bit of time. They had to fight for more time for their master. Time was extremely precious to Lord Taishan, who was about to break through to the next level. He naturally did not want Lord Taishan to be disturbed. Who knew that she had a Runhuang-level figure helping her? Said Luo Chongyang coldly. He looked up at the character that read the way. He stretched out his hand, and in a flash the sky darkened. A huge palm print appeared in the sky and slammed down into the character. Boom! There was a loud noise as all of Taishan Mountain trembled violently. The character that read the way was shattered. In that instant, all the people on Taishan Mountain could no longer feel its mystical will. All of the cultivators of Taishan Mountain looked coldly at Luo Chongyang. Old Demon Luo had always been overbearing and unreasonable. And now it seemed that Prince Luo Chongyang had inherited his temperament. He was just as overbearing. He had actually directly destroyed the character that Lord Taishan had carved. The Taishan Hierophant looked up at the peak of the mountain. At that moment, he realized that since his opponent wanted to make trouble, he would not delay for too long. No matter what, he would find an excuse to attack. The people from the divine capital of Xiling had come here to disturb Lord Taishan and make him unable to reach the next level. When you reached the Runhuang level, every time you tried to advance, you were making a gamble with heaven and earth. This was especially true of someone at the peak of the Runhuang level. They must have profound insight, and then they had to seize an opportunity to break their shackles. Once their concentration was broken, the way would be blocked, and there was a high probability that they would fail and would have no way to break through to the next level. The character that read the way was not only for the benefit of the people who had come here to cultivate. Lord Taishan had also carved it for himself. He had used the character to connect himself to the heavens and the earth, and to help him understand things. Now Luo Chongyang had raised his hand and destroyed it. Luo Chongyang, said the Taishian Hierophant coldly. That character was carved by our master. If you had come here as guests, we would have welcomed you. But you came here to cause trouble, so go on back to Xiling. He stepped forward as he said this. In a flash, Mighty will press down all over the mountain, covering everyone within it, including both the disciples of Taishian Mountain and the cultivators of the divine capital of Xiling. It seemed that if Luo Chongyang did anything, he would be burying everyone else along with himself. Luo Chongyang allowed his aura to burst forth as well. He stood there like a god of death. He looked at the Taishian Hierophant with his black eyes. Taishian Mountain went dark, and death will wrapped around everyone. If any Runhuang level figures acted, any saint level figures would be about as useful in the fight as ants. If you want to fight, then fight. No need to inflict suffering on the innocent. The god of the golden divine nation released his dazzling golden radiance, covering himself and the cultivators of the golden divine nation. He had formed a golden light curtain. The palace lord of the divine music palace took a small step forward as well. The heavenly music of the great path rang out, protecting the disciples of the Shangxiao divine palace. An invisible storm of the great path swept through the air, terrible to the extreme. The saint-level cultivators there felt that they were insignificant in the face of its might. Many of the people regretted having come to Taishian Mountain. They should never have come here. Once the battle really started, the consequences would be too disastrous to imagine. The city lord of Taishian and String Emperor stepped out, and their might covered all of Taishian Mountain. It seemed like once their opponents started fighting, they would do whatever it took to defeat the cultivators from the divine capital of Xiling. But at that moment, they saw a cold light flash in Luo Chongyang's eyes and he smiled. He seemed to be mocking them. Lord Taishian is your elder, and under his tutelage, your cultivation has reached the heavens. I came here to pay a visit. How could I have come here by myself? Said Luo Chongyang coldly. As he said this, the Taishian Hierophant's expression changed a little bit, as did the others. In reality, the Taishian Hierophant had thought of this. His spiritual covered all of Taishian Mountain, but he had not sensed old demon Luo. But there was a possibility that his level was just too high, and so he could not sense his existence. This isn't good. The Taishian Hierophant suddenly sensed a powerful danger. Although he still did not sense an aura, someone's incredibly high level still made him feel that indescribable threat. Indeed, at the moment that he felt this, a burst of terrible demonic power descended. A hand stretched down from the sky. It was a demonic palm print from the heavens, smashing into Taishian Palace at the peak of Taishian Mountain. Boom! There was a loud noise, and the palace at the top of Taishian Mountain was reduced to dust. In the next moment, everyone saw a demonic figure appear in the sky. It was the lord of the divine capital of Xiling, old demon Luo. I had heard that Lord Taishian was about to break through to the next level, and so I came to pay my respects, said old demon Luo, his voice shaking the heavens and the earth. The people of Taishian City could not help but tremble. Old demon Luo had come here himself, just to stop Lord Taishian from breaking through to the next level. He had not hesitated to start a battle and destroy Taishian Palace. His determination was obvious. The divine capital of Xiling did not want to see Lord Taishian advance to the next level. My lord, the Taishian Hierophant and the others looked up. Everyone's gaze fell upon the ruined palace. Taishian Palace had stood at the peak of Taishian Mountain and had stood as a symbol for them. Now it had been destroyed by old demon Luo. Amidst the ruins, a figure gradually opened his eyes. Lord Taishian was dressed in a simple robe, and his body was covered in dust, but this could not hide his elegance. The Taishian Hierophant and the others bowed. We were not strong enough to protect you. We let them disturb your cultivation. Old demon Luo of the divine capital of Xiling came. How could you have defended me? Lord Taishian answered indifferently. He obviously did not blame them. Old demon Luo was at his level, and had brought his son Luo Chongyang. If his opponents wanted to forcibly disturb his cultivation, they would have had no way to stop them. Long time no see, Lord Taishian, said old Demon Luo calmly, just like they were old friends. There was none of the fierceness from before. Lord Taishian nodded. Indeed. I have missed you all this time. At that moment, everyone in Taishian City felt a suffocating pressure. The two of them were talking casually, but they could feel an incredibly threatening atmosphere. The worldly great path flowed, and the weather changed. A brilliant light shone from Lord Taishuan's arms. It was sword light. At that moment, all of the vastness of the world seemed to shine with sword light. There were swords everywhere. Lord Taishian himself was suffused with brilliant light, as if he was a sword himself. The third strike of the fleeting divine sword is fleeting swordsmanship. I see it clearly, said Lord Taishian. His voice rang out across Taishian Mountain. Everyone's faces became very solemn as they looked towards him. Was he talking to someone? Or was he speaking to all of the swordsmen on Taishian Mountain? The third strike of the fleeting divine sword was the most powerful, and it was the final one. Everyone was staring at him. As they watched him, he raised his arms and pointed at the sky. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.